recording.
Yep, I did it. All righty. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to people around the world. This is Martin Hubel, your jovial host of the DB2 Night Show today. I was just catching up with my good friend Dave Belke. We had some time before the show, and it's always an added benefit of running the show is to catch up with good friends before they do their presentation. Today, Dave is back with us, and Dave actually has been promoted in IBM's eyes. He's now not only an IBM champion, but a lifetime champion, which means that he doesn't have to fill out the paperwork anymore, and they actually give him additional swag. So it's great to have you honored in that way, Dave, and congratulations.
Thank you very much, Martin. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and today we're going to talk about DB2 security and the best practices to design security into your database and applications. And we'll look forward to hearing that after I get the housekeeping out of the way. And as this is our social media page, as always, the main thing is to make sure you subscribe to our hashtag DB2Night so you see upcoming announcements of shows and that sort of thing. The other big part there is the replays on YouTube, and you can follow us on there. If you need to reach out to the show, you can do that through our LinkedIn group or via email. Anything sent to DBI will eventually or quickly make it to me, and we're always looking for suggestions on new speakers and other things of that nature. So please let us know. Here's our disclaimers, etc., and the copyright stuff. There are trademarks, and we respect everyone's. And we're recording it, and of course we'll make the replay available afterwards. And here's our quick announcements. I've got an LUW show coming up. I had a speaker lined up, but I just haven't been able to get a final confirm from him on that. But the date, please save the date, is October 15th. And then on November the 12th on the LUW side, we have Satya Krishnaswamy. He's the program director in the IBM lab here in Toronto, and he's going to speak on something related to the DB2 engine. We're excited about that. That'll be a great talk, and as always, we appreciate IBM taking such a great interest in the DB2 Night Show. For the DB2 ZOS or ZOS edition, we have Brian Laube from Manulife speaking next month, and also in November I'm speaking to various people, and I'll soon have speakers lined up all the way through January on both platforms. So please stay tuned. It seems that this summer got away from me. It was both hot and wonderful, and I spent a lot of time in the pool, and then some other events happened, as you might have heard. So things just get a little slow getting off the mark this year, but we're picking it up real soon. And as always, our founding sponsor of the DB2 Night Show is DBI Software, and you can watch a demo of their product anytime you like off their page. And if you do that, they'll send you a Starbucks gift card. It's always time well spent if you do that. And our winner last week was Tony Ludwig of Delta, and they're sending him an Amazon gift certificate. That's all the fun stuff. And as I mentioned on the DB2 Night Show last week with the LUW edition, I wanted to mention the passing of Scott Hayes, and it's a shame. He succumbed to COVID in August, and the way an awful lot of people remember Scott was his outgoing nature at conferences, and this is probably the best shot I've seen of Scott recently. It was posted by Mike Krafik, and Mike obviously with Scott there. They did the Sydney Bridge climb, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and they're having quite a good time up there at the top, and somebody took their picture. And that's kind of what Scott people remember of Scott. And one of the reasons I wanted Dave to be on the show, because Dave, I wanted to give you a chance to share your remembrances of Scott as well.
Yeah, Scott and I attended and presented at a lot of the IDUG conferences in North America and Europe and in Australia, and it was just great having a travel friend and somebody that I could always talk to about all the travel issues and everything else. I miss Scott terribly, and the industry will also.
Yeah, thanks. I also presented and did, I don't know how, I'm sure there's a count, but there was many presentations and courses that Scott and I ended up teaching as full-day seminars at various IDUGs in terms of doing DB2 performance seminars together. So my experiences are very much the same. And I do remember one in particular, he had this one thing where he was trying to demonstrate a heavily loaded system versus a lightly loaded system, and he would always conscript a younger person from the audience to run from the back of the conference room to the front and say that was easy, and then he would load a big backpack on the person and say do the same run, and it would always take them a lot longer. I remember in North America, he went out and got some rocks out of the garden with the help of the hotel staff, and in Europe, he took care of it himself by loading the entire backpack up with Czech beer, because we were in Prague at the time, and I remember.
Yeah, that was always.
And then of course, before he could travel home, we had to lighten the backpack back by drinking all the beer, but that was not a hardship.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so there's just some details on that, and what Scott's career was and what he did for IDUG and things like that. In later years, I'm actually wearing the IDUG 2016 shirt from Austin, Texas, where IDUG had a party organized by both DBI and IBM, and they put out a nice T-shirt. And I like the blue color, so I wear it a lot.
There you go.
Yeah, and again, this is our last time I'll put this picture up. Likely is when I got my award, and we also were presented with an award in 2014 in Prague. I imagine it was that same conference, although there was another Prague conference in about 2016 or 17 as well.
Yeah, both of those were fantastic. Prague is such a beautiful city.
Yes, and you need to spend more time there.
Yeah.
And as always with the show, our sponsors are DBI and Martin Hubel Consulting, DBI being the founding sponsor of the DB2 Night Show. I was actually looking back through it, and I guess I've been doing the show now. This is my ninth or 10th year of being a host on the night show. So now let's move on and pull up our polls and see what people are up to. Let me launch the, whoops, darn, I hit the button too quickly there. I want to open that again. Is there a way to open that again?
Yeah, of course there is.
I just don't know how to do that.
Start it over and go back.
The whole webinar? No, we're not going to do that. I think we're going to have to do without that first question. We're just going to go. We're just going to
let that one go by. Okay.
I'll put it back down to host error again. I just like to make different. I'd like to make different mistakes every time I make mistakes. There was a question on the latest version of DB2. I do have another question coming up on that, so I'm feeling better about at least the question I lost there was the one on the level of DB2Z. People are viewing that. Most people are on 11.5 or higher. That's absolutely great news. Nobody's on 11.1. That's also fine. And let's move along and do the next question. When do you plan to move to DB2 for ZOS vNext? We'll launch that and get Martin away from the close button. And seeing when people are going to move on to the newest, latest, and greatest. This is kind of interesting.
Yeah. The new ZOS is sounding very, very good.
Yes, yeah, they continue to work away at it. I'm very impressed with the new things they're doing for developers on that platform as well.
Yeah, the developer stuff should be fantastic for helping everybody with all the containers and GitHub and all the other various other things that they got to do.
Yes, now that development has really moved along with Agile and GitHub and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Getting people up to date on that is just great. So here we see that some people are real excited and they'll go in 2022, or 25% of our audience should be on vNext by the end of 2022, and then in 2023, and some people are longer. It seems the more you use a product, sometimes it takes you a little longer to get to the promised land.
Yeah.
And okay, here are some security questions which are related to the topic. What security procedures are used when you're doing security for code reviews? And whether any of the automated processes are in place? And we're letting people have a good vote here. All right, everybody's voted, so let me close that off and we'll share the results there.
Wow. Manual review is over half.
Well, you know what? That's what IBM stands for, right? And my daughter was actually very, very upset with me when she realized that, as a joke, I told her at about the age of 10 that it stands for "it's better manually." And she actually believed me for many, many years. She found out about it. She gave me, dare I say.
Hey, those numbers don't add up, Martin. What's wrong with your polling thing there?
Well, they don't add up because I allowed people to choose more than one.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, but I actually, she gave me the stink eye one of many times. That it was not the first time I'd received that treatment. Just saying. And last question before we turn things over to Dave is, when was the last time you had a security audit? And this one you only get to vote once.
There you go.
And people are voting quickly on this, so we'll let that happen. And that's all good news. So I'll close that off and share the results there. And we see that one company did one in the last 6 months, and the last year is most of our audience, and 25% aren't sure. So with that, I'm going to close that off. I'll move things forward. And there you are. And so I'm going to come over here and click on you, and you will become the presenter in the time-honored fashion. As always, to our good-looking audience, please feel free to use the question and answer tool we have. If you write them in there, I'll break in at the correct time and let Dave know that you've asked a question, and we'll get you an answer.
Yeah, I'll be happy to take any questions in the chat. Just do them in the chat, and then I'll break. I got some breaks in the presentation. Can you see my screen okay, Martin?
I certainly can. It says DB2 Night Show on it, and this Best Practices Volume 3+.
Yeah, this presentation is the third version. I've got 2 other volumes of security best practices that I encourage people to go to. There you can see my Twitter and LinkedIn. I encourage you to hook up, and we can interact that way. This is me. I've been doing DB2 forever. Yeah, I've been doing all the presentations like Martin. And in some of the security volume 1 and volume 2, I've stolen some material and put it in this one, but there's things that are unique to those other speeches, and they're available on the internet somewhere also. But the reason we're talking about security is because it's all about the money. And security breaches are increasing. The number of security breaches are increasing. The cost impacts of those security breaches and the complex nature of nation-state actors and hackers coming after your system is getting more and more deadly and getting more and more information. The T-Mobile hack was recently and seriously impacted everybody on the T-Mobile network. Also, the hacking of the Microsoft Cloud, where they were able to get the sign-on credentials for everyone that uses the Microsoft Cloud, was quite revealing how deadly some of these and costly some of these hacking things can do. The average hack now costs the company about $4 million. So the reason you're doing this is because you want to save your company money, save its reputation, save its business, because once a company gets hacked, nobody wants to deal with that company anymore. So security is only as good as the weakest link that you've got. And it's all about all the supporting technologies. So it's not just the database, it's the operating system, the networks, the cloud is a huge opportunity for hackers, all the web applications and the application servers and the various data servers that you've got out there, and also the code that the developers are doing. That college student that you just hired that's doing the Java program for your new environment, well, he just put in a nice security hole that can be exploited by anybody. So how are you going to monitor that? How are you going to recognize that? How are you going to avoid that going into production? So you really need to take a look at your full weakest link of the things that are happening in your environment. It's really outrageous when I see the different policies and procedures for some of the applications that are out there these days. It's just non-existent, and they expect to maintain security. So that's why security audits are always very important. But being a DB2 database guy, there's a lot of things that we can verify on the system administrators, the other DBAs that we're working with, the operators, and we can go and look at the policies and procedures that we interact with, especially on the Unix sysadmins. We want to really tighten up the whole security within the Unix environment, because it's only usually as good as the system admin that came in and set up the security around the database. Also, we have all the RESTful interfaces that are happening where you can put modules in. The other problem with all the new applications and servers that are out there is a lot of them come with pre-installed interfaces or web services. One of the things you need to do is identify when you're going in and installing these applications or these servers or these packages on your Unix box, what additional services are you enabling? So what you want to do is look at the RESTful services, the web services, or any of the other things, capabilities that that web service or that server that you've just installed or that application that you just installed, what things are in there that you're not really using, and you want to shut them off. You want to shut those services that aren't being used and take those modules that execute against that system or on that platform off of that platform. The other interesting thing that I find when I do security audits is there is applications that are authorized that shouldn't be authorized. This happens a lot in the legacy systems, but I recently did a security audit on an LUW system, and they had a whole bunch of packages that didn't have different functions and features turned off. So you really want to look at the infrastructure that you've got and turn off all the things. Thousands, millions of security situations every day, every minute. When you read those two reports that I mentioned on the first slide, it's amazing what some companies and the complexity of those security issues. One of the things you want to do is, as an administrator, is see if you can get to level 4 of the FIPS 140 security protocols. One of the things that I'm going to give you today is a script that will generate revoke public access. It's coming up in a few slides. You want to make sure that public access to your database isn't anywhere to be found, if at all possible. You want to make sure that you only have role definitions and no explicit user IDs are anywhere in your system, so that the role is the thing that gets executed or is executing against your DB2 system, and this is both on ZOS and LUW. You also want to have more than one admin. And so when that admin goes on vacation, or that one admin, but you want to monitor and make sure that you lock down that admin functionality and that everything that that admin does is logged. Every keystroke, everything that's done on the system, everything that's done at the database level, as far as the authorizations and as far as the configuration, because one bad configuration setting or configuration change can open up a huge hole in your security schemes. The other aspects is all database data should be encrypted. All the data at rest all the time is encrypted, and all communications are encrypted. Using level 3 is memorize secret, biometric, or cryptographic software or device. I try to make sure that any system that works with the public always has a two-factor a security profile, so that if it if it doesn't recognize somebody, or if somebody's coming in from a strange browser, you get the text message or a phone call to put in a code. That's one of the best things you can do is the two-factor authentication. That's a level 4 FIPS. So what you want to do is you want to partner when you're working on a ZOS environment. You want to partner with any security package that you've got, RACF, ACF2, Top Secret, all those things. And you want to make sure that you're working with the roles that are defined. If you have particular user IDs still defined in your ZOS system or your LUW system, that is potentially a failure on a security audit, depending on how strict your company is for putting that security audit in place. Also, when you're working with a DB2 LUW and all the Unix services or Windows services, you want to make sure that all the service accounts and all the job schedulers on ZOS are using a role-based ID. So understand what these roles can do. On DB2 ZOS and DB2 LUW, it's very easy to put in the Opper profile for the schedulers, and this can be very, very effective for getting all your jobs run within your system. Also, you want to make sure that that account is different from your test to your QA to your production test to your production environment. So you want to have a different ID or a different role name for those different environments. So know the boundaries of what those different roles and what those different service accounts can do. And this is how you design some of the security within your change management, your CM procedures, so that as things go through the process, they have different security profiles and security is defined within that particular environment. The other thing that can be done very nicely, but I don't see enough of when I'm doing security audits for clients, is row and column access for PII information or label-based access information. Some different vendors are trying to put some of this into their products, but they're having difficulty doing that, and clients are having issues. One of the big problems is I see in security audits that DB2 Connect or the web servers that are being used aren't being kept up, and they don't have fully encrypted communications and connection definitions. So you really want to review how everybody is connecting in your ZOS environment to your DDF system. And in your LUW system, you usually have an application server or something like that using Apache Tomcat or JBoss or something. You want to look at how those connections are being authorized, how they're being grouped, how they're being connection concentrated, and all that. But one of the most important things that you want to do is you want to monitor all the SQL that comes within your environment and have it so that you can identify something that is an anomaly, something that is a rogue application. This is be something that would come into your environment that wouldn't be a normal SQL statement. This is really difficult for analytics type environments where ad hoc queries are built all the time, but you really want to take a look at what kind of SQL is coming in. But one of the things that you can do on DB2LUW or DB2ZOS is put in Steganography. And this is the way of defining your database so that you add either data fields by padding data, you shift the data, you scramble the data, you reverse the data, or you have formulas that you use to access the data that scrambles social security numbers, credit card numbers, keys for the different PII information that you have. One of the things that I've done, not only in addition to padding data, data shifting, and formulas in scrambling, is also use alternative fields for some of the things, like using binary fields, non-display characters, special characters. When you have to display a social security number, have the social security number be packed in binary, and only allow the access to the customer service reps to only access or have the last 4 digits of the social security number. Legacy databases, it's really easy to put these procedures into the database without any database changes. It's an application change, and it's real good for social security numbers, credit card numbers, all sorts of customer keys within it. And it's basically just hide it in case. I've got 2 quick examples for Steganography. This is the most common method, is a salt and pepper concept. In the States, social security number is 9 digits. Usually have a database that has social security number with decimal 9 digits. When we have this data shift, this person is from California. So in California, we shifted 3 bytes because of California. So what is inserted into the database is 456789123. So the Steganography is done through the data shift, and this can be done through a edit proc, field proc, a store procedure, a Java class, anything, so that the data at rest is the Steganography that is happening. And then if your data gets hacked and the information is stolen, the people will have the wrong social security number, and the value of the data will go down. Another method is to use a larger field for the social security number and define it as a decimal 11. Again, we have the situation where we put a front digit or put a back digit on it, and we know that the middle digits, well, is it the middle digits, or is it digits shifted over, or are we shifting it over 3 times because of California in addition to the social security number? One of the things that I've also seen is the social security number stored in the phone number, and the phone number stored in the social security number. So even the schema names and the names of the fields are used for steganography processes. So this is a very easy, cheap, very simple, straightforward method of doing steganography for your database. And it's very easy to define, and with DB2 compression and everything like that, the storage costs or the processing costs are actually minimized. It works out very nicely, and I really encourage people to do this because it's a really cheap form of taking care of things. One of the things when I go into do security audits is you really want to make sure that you understand the risk of an application. If you have a company's package, hopefully they've gone through the whole security of whole methodology and change management process of securing their application. One of the things that I really see all the time when I'm doing security audits is logging and monitoring are not locked down. You really want to take a look at securing your application logs, and this is not only your DB2 logs, but also the logs of the web servers and application servers, because the Java programmers, the C++ programmers are always putting messages out to the logs so they can debug things. That debugging and those messaging things that are occurring is a huge overhead to the application. Not only is it a security situation, but potentially can be a huge performance problem. So you want to really make sure that you've locked down the overall processing logs that you have within your system. Error handling, one of the audits that I did, every time they got a customer not found, they said this is the customer ID and this is the field that, or the SQL that was used for the not found situation. Again, this is something that you want to address through your coding reviews and your standard security techniques. Also, you want to make sure that everything is secure and encrypted communications. Some of the RESTful processes that are out there these days haven't really been security evolved, and depending on when those services were put in place, they didn't use encryption for communicating and enabling those services. So these things and these factors all make up, what is your security rating and your security audit risk rating for each of your applications. As legacy systems continue to evolve, you want to make sure that you stay up with the software updates, because some of the older software has a tendency to run out of security or memory issues or something like that. So you really want to make sure your legacy systems take up. Martin, any questions?
Sorry, just trying to find the mute button. No questions so far, thanks. You're doing
okay, great. Okay, good. So when I have conversations with people about security audits and security things, is like, how do I test the revoked situation? Well, before you do these scripts within your environment, one of the best ways to do the processing for your revoke cleanups and things like that is do that at your DR site. You can do a redirected restore of your production environment on an LUW system, and that's a good way of checking out the revokes impacts and the cascading effects that happen in your system. But on the ZOS system, we don't have the terabytes or petabytes usually for doing a redirected or redirected restore. One of the things that you can do with a big ZOS system is talk to your DR planners, and at the very end of your DR, after the applications have checked out and everything is working on the application side, go in and do the security work of revoking various authorities or various old sysids or sysadmins that are out there, or security administrators that are out there. Do it at your DR site and check out to make sure that your applications are still working and everything is working. So be careful when you clean up, but there's a real good way to do it. When you're cleaning up in the DB2 LUW environment, there are 4 big things that are immediate security audit fail. And that is if you're using default ports, if you're sharing a machine between test and production, and if your instances are using default TCP/IP. So what you can do with this is get that information from the DB2, get DB2, get DBM config and get DBM. One of the things that you want to do is make sure that you don't have the discover mode on, because if your DB2 system is in the discovery mode, you have the opportunity for other people to try to connect to you. So you really want to look at what your discovery parameters are and disable those if at all possible. You want to make sure that that is a situation that doesn't exist in your production. And again, that's an immediate hack me sign on your DB2 instance and a fail. One of the things that I typically find is DB2 Connect version is really old, and it hasn't had the AES encryption, data encrypt setting set. All your processing should be set to have encrypted communications between the DB2 system and the application server. Make sure you're using the TLS, which uses the FIPS 140-2 interfaces. And not only is your data encrypted in your production environment, but also in your test, QA, and your performance database environments also. You really want to look at that and have encryption across everything. One of the first security audits I did for a long time ago was for a financial company that in the Midwest that should remain nameless. It was a bank, and they were taking one partition's worth of information from the production system and porting it down to the test environment for their developers to test with. Immediately flagged this as a Sarbanes-Oxley, if everybody goes back in the early days, as an error and a security audit situation. Management was amazed that they were doing this, and this was a normal practice. So you really want to look at what policies and procedures you have in for manufacturing or working with synthetic data in your test systems. Every process to take, one of the things you want to make sure that you're doing is you're processing your data and backing up your data all the time. But a lot of people aren't backing up aren't encrypting their backups. So you really want to look at where you're backing up and what backup procedures you have in place. You want to look and take your legacy encryption and make sure that encryption is taken in all your DB2 LUW backups. And it's really easy to make your backups encrypted. The old triple DES, the 3 DES is deprecated, and the new AES is the new endorsed configuration for your DB2 system. You really want to make sure that you're using the latest and greatest encryption, and these are the commands to encrypt your backups and to take care of that situation. One of the things also, between your DB2 LUW and DB2 ZOS, your web servers and your connections and your threads, one of the things you really want to make sure is that you have a different name for each of your application servers within your environment. This is really important because each one of these different names, if there's a hacking or a security issue, when you come in and try to research it, you'll know the server to go to. I was at a shipping company in the South, and they had a performance issue, and we were able to track down the performance issue to one application that was coming in from that one application server. So look at your connection properties. Not only make sure that they have a different name for each server, but all the properties mirror each other so that you have the same security profile for these different things. Setting up a trusted context is somewhat involved, but once you get it down, it's really, really easy to replicate and do on your various servers. The link at the bottom of the page is a way to a step-by-step process for setting up a trusted context between your various servers and your DB2 LUW or DB2 LUW systems. So when you start talking about procedures and possibilities, you're only dealing with 4 levels of security within your environment. And looking at the security levels, you've got the administrators, you've got the database people, you got the application objects and application developers, and then you've got special columns within different tables that you can control. So you really have only the 4 different levels of security within DB2 LUW and DB2 ZOS. So what you want to look at when you're getting into these things is look up and who has public access, and if the public access is in there, you want to take that out as much as possible. I was doing a security review for a large bank on the West Coast, and I was amazed at how much public access they had within their DB2 system. This SQL statement that is in the middle of the page will generate a revoke statement for all the public situations that you have. We did this against the system, and we came up with 70,000 different revoke statements. So it was quite incredible the amount of revoking of public or amount of public access that was within that system. Again, you change the statement for the different schemas that you have in DB2 LUW. There's a similar SQL statement for ZOS later on, and this will revoke all the public access within your system. Now, you got to be careful when you're doing this, because a lot of your tooling, a lot of your application things are depending on that public access. So you really want to look at where that public access is used within the various tools and within the various things that are going on. You really want to take a look at the revokes that are generated and make sure that you eliminate all the right ones. Again, bind add, the database, a lot of things for monitoring and everything else are granted to public. You really want to take that out, because if it's granted to public, everybody can get into your SQL monitor and look at all the SQL statements that are being executed against your system, and then use those SQL statements to hack the important data that's in your environment. Again, the monitors, the connection summaries, all the monitoring tables that you have within your DB2 system, you want to take that out of the public realm. And again, here are some of the authorizations that are happening. As I said before, those other statements generated. So these are some additional grants, the who's who of who is using your system and what roles are in your system. This is a good way to see what role can be defined, and then what users need to be defined to that role. I like to have roles that are application database specific and application function specific. So you may have a role that says application 1 read and then application 1 write. Two different roles for two different types of users within the system, and you know, how they're being used within that. These next set of SQL statements are for the various people that own the various objects. This is very important, because if you own an object, you have the ability to do all sorts of things against that object. Other things are the security against the containers and against the data sets that your DB2 system is working with. One of the things that is wonderful to see is when you're working with a DB2 LUW system, and not only are they protecting all the DB2 processes in the DB2 system, but there's also Unix rules and security rules wrapped around the DB2 data sets in the DB2 things. I was doing a performance review for a federal agency that had this in place, and I was very happy to see that not only did they have the DB2 roles defined properly, but they also had restrictions around who could reference the various directories that the DB2 system was using for its table spaces, for its index spaces, for its logs, for its monitoring, and also they had rules around the data sets for the monitoring of the web application servers. So use these queries as a starting point. There's these queries and similar queries also on the IBM website, so check it out. Also, one of the great things that I've seen is email notifications. Setting up a nice email script in your cron tab so that you can have the DB2 system or the system email you when there's security violations. Triggers are a huge opportunity for hackers to get information. Putting a trigger into your environment every time a new credit card comes in, they can have a trigger and send that credit card to them. This way you can see the number of triggers that are set up. If any new triggers get into your system, or anything gets more rows than you think, you can send a DB2 alert to yourself. This has worked out very wonderful for me. I did this a long time ago for a system on the West Coast where we were tracking internet ads. And this worked out very nicely for alerting people, and not only alerting me, but also other people within the company. So when you start thinking about, oh, Martin, any questions yet?
No, we're good.
Okay, good. All right. As we move into the ZOS environment, one of the things you want to make sure that you start to look at, this slide has been in my security presentations for the last 4 years. when I do security audits, I keep finding things that show the technology versions. And one of the reasons that you really want to hide all the technology versions from everything is because then the hacker doesn't know what he's dealing with and what is going on with the different technology levels. If you don't have a patch on a particular technology version, sometimes it's easy to be hacked. So you really want to hide all the technology versions. Remove any unnecessary server processes. That's some of the software installation things that I was talking about. And you want to make sure that if they have a security ID, that they can't go from one system to the next or one application to the next. You want to make sure that there's different security profiles for different applications, for different servers within your environment. One of the things that I see when I reviewed ZOS systems is some bad components from years past where you're keeping threads alive forever. This is a huge or a potential security issue where threads can get reused because that thread it's hanging around is already authorized. So somebody hijacks that other thread, that idle thread, it could already be authorized. So you really want to take the number of timeout values and keep that as low as possible. Keep your number of connections as low as possible, but this can be a performance issue. So you really want to work with your performance people to put the right number of connections in there. Limit the request size. If somebody tried to download a 500 gigabytes of data and file transfer it out of your system, would you be able to detect that? So limit the request size, the reply size, and also how do you detect SQL statements that aren't in your environment or aren't coming from your environment? Do you have a limit on the number of SQL statements that can be done via connection? Or, if your web server gets taken over, what seems to be going? One of the things that you really want to do is make sure you have trusted contexts everywhere, especially in the ZOS. The null ID stuff in your DB2 ZOS calendar really isn't used too much anymore, and you want to remove that stuff if at all possible. Remove your default programs and classes. A lot of the sample stuff that isn't being used, you want to make sure that that's not executable. Only approve those service log and analyze things, but you want to make sure that those logs can only be referenced by the right people and by the right security profiles, and only have encrypted access. One of the things that is, I was at a large company in Colorado that they had a ZOS system, and they had a security settings that were less than desirable. They had transactions going to every DB2 system all over the place. So any transaction could be executed on any DB2 data sharing member. We did a combination security performance review for them, and we came up with a dynamic virtual IP and methodology so that particular transactions would be funneled to particular data sharing members. By caching and routing these different transactions to different DB2 data sharing members, we were able to get huge performance improvements and also help them route their security profiles and trim down their security profiles. So when they came into the system, if they were going after the customer service, that would go customer service database, that would go to one data sharing member. If they were ordering information, it would go to another data sharing member. If they were in the warehousing where they're moving things around, or if they were doing analytics, they would go into. This was very good for understanding the different transaction profiles, but what we also discovered was some interesting other transactions were happening within this environment. By putting this VIPA, DVIPA situation in, we were very easily able to identify and capture transaction profiles and streamline the profiles and security mechanisms and also thread reuse for the different environments. This was a huge security tightening practice and also a huge performance improvement. So security can also help you improve your performance also. One of the things you want to make sure is you monitor and analyze all your information. Know who, what, where, what are the IDs that are doing most of your updates, who can reference your PII, and what are these security profiles that are using. Is your main update processing at the end of the day? Do you want to have a special ID that only used for updates? Other things that are happening these days, they're geofencing or geo-validating a lot of the connections that are coming in. Are some of your connections coming in from North Korea, China, Iran? You want to really look at these, the geofencing of your different things. Geofencing is a new technique, or not really a new technique, but it's getting more sophisticated to give a better security profile for your various systems. Database encryption is always very, very important. I've been fortunate, I've been dealing with a lot of government clients recently where encryption is done at the software disk hardware level. And this is really the best place that you can put encryption, but if you don't have that option, you really want to make sure that you use DB2s, especially on LUW, to encrypt it with the AES keys. And you want to use a long AES key if at all possible. ZOS has the encryption passwords. You can have a decrypt bit, decrypt character. There's all sorts of DB2 ZOS functions. The example on the bottom is an example of how you can encrypt a social security number. Again, there is a minor performance hit for these things, but it's really, really minute. But if you're doing millions and tens of millions or hundreds of millions or billions of inserts and updates, you can have an impact. These decryption, encryption methodologies and statements use algorithms that are burnt into the ZOS chips and some of the Unix chips, so the encryption doesn't really cost you that much sometimes.
Hello?
Yes. Martin, do you have a question?
Sorry, I had my mic on, my phone rang.
No problem.
my bad. Again.
Yeah, mine's been vibrating across my desk, so I hear you. So encryption is a wonderful thing. I really encourage everybody to do it. When you use a storage device encryption, it eliminates any database overhead for the encryption. All the encryption is handled through the I/O mechanisms within the storage device, and there's enough processing power on the storage device itself to take care of the encrypting and decrypting. The DS8800 is a wonderful, wonderful machine, and it can do all sorts of I/O and performance on the DS8800 is fantastic. I've been blessed in some of my recent clients where they've done storage encryption, and it handles all of it for you. It's fantastic. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But if you do get into it, remember that symmetric is one key for encrypting and decrypting. Another is asymmetric, and that's two keys, one key for encrypt and one for decryption. So one of the things, again, with DB2 ZOS is you want to take care of all the public access that is within your system, and you want to revoke it as much as possible. Again, depending on your PeopleSoft or SAP or whatever application package that you have, you can sometimes run into tens of thousands of public user IDs or user IDs that are referencing the public access. So you really want to be careful with that. The blue SQL queries take care of your trusted contexts. One of the things I encourage people to do right away is to see if they're using trusted contexts. When you use those three queries to look at them, you'll notice that all the queries have the fetch first 10 rows only with UR, because some of these queries can return tens of thousands of rows. And I put that on there for your safety, but know that there's going to be more than 10 rows usually for a lot of these queries that are happening. Again, audit policies that you have within your environment. Look at the number of rows that are associated with the roles, the security roles that you have. It continues to amaze me that when I come in, I did a security audit for a Wall Street firm, and I was amazed at the sysadmin that had been gone for the company for the last 8 years was still defined as a user within the system. They had not taken care of that old system administrator because they weren't sure what his ID would cascade down to. So you really want to look at the particular IDs that are still out there. Some IDs that are still hard-coded in routines. It is just amazing what you can find in the LUW systems of the old web servers that are out there. When you think of legacy systems, people don't think about all the Java applications that they wrote in the 90s that are still active today. There are really some amazing things in some of these LUW systems, and as I said, even the ZOS systems. But it's the hard-coded things that I've found on some of these security audits is pretty incredible. So look at your security IDs, understand those, and now talk to your developers, all the administrators that you've got out there. My next presentation, the next version of this security audit thing is going to focus directly in on Java best practices and Java security and what you can do in a ZOS environment with RACF top secret rules to handle that stuff. One of the biggest problems that I have with the development community now is they're using this open source software all over the place, and you don't know who wrote it, where it came from, and if it's safe. You really want to look at the commit scope, the thread safe, and stay away from any of these frameworks if at all possible. Design a good model view controller process. I continue to be amazed when I do performance reviews for people that Java programmers are still trying to read hundreds of millions of rows into memory and then using routines to go against the memory blocks. Encryption routines need to be within all your applications, especially all the new ones. No one should be trying to design and doing security modules, no POJO. Keep it in the database, limit your temporary files, make sure that you're not passing data in the clear from one platform to the next. Look at your different distribution of your PII information, and look at your different things that are protecting your crown jewels of your DB2 system. Yeah, sorry about that. Look at the different things that you have to limit your access, and look at your PII information. Is it in one table, or is it in multiple tables? Is it in multiple databases? Is it in multiple tables across multiple databases? Where are your crown jewels of your PII information? And is it all encrypted? And does it all have different access? So you really want to make sure that if somebody has one particular security ID, that they aren't able just to fly through multiple systems or multiple databases and scoop up all that information. You want to have different roles or different security profiles. One of the things when I'm doing security audits, I find that people are still using these old Java security modules in some of the early Java applications. It's amazing. If you find any of these things, these are noted in a lot of the rational products, not to make sure that they're not being used. Avoid calling these JavaX security auth, doing privileges and things of that nature. So you really want to look at your security, and a lot of the ZOS development products, Rational for ZOS and Rational Application Developer are ways that you can review things. I am not a fan of frameworks. Hibernate is awful. Spring Batch, Spring is terrible, and a lot of the other struts and Grails and other things are huge security profile issues. You really want to check out your open source software against the NIST National Vulnerability Database. It's very easy to use, but a lot of these things in open source these days are very security problems. Again, look at the version of the software that you're using. Look at the open source. You know, was the open source put out there and Git so that somebody would scoop it up and put it into their system and then open up a huge hole for the hacking community? There's all sorts of types of injection that is happening through these various languages, not only through the application code that you write, but also through the memory usage of some of these modules. The other thing that's really important these days is JavaScript. JavaScript execution can be done all over the place by JavaScript tools and open source products. Really want to look at all those things, and especially use parameter markers. Not only everybody understands to use it in Java applications, but also use it in R, Python, JavaScript, XML, whatever you're using. Make sure you use parameter markers so that you don't get the SQL injection possibilities. So in summary, for the developers, validate your application, minimize the open source that you've got, do your best practices for security, and do a peer review if at all possible. One of the best things you can do for security is keep the version of your Java or your R or your Python or whatever up to date. The security updates continue to, and the security patches continue through. Verify your version that you're using against the NIST or the common vulnerabilities database so that you understand what things. Using outdated or old versions is one of the big, huge things that you can have for security holes in your environment. Make sure that your source code is doing two-factor authentication. Everything's encrypted between the application and the database. Make sure parameter markers, and make sure you're not logging all the PII information into a log that can be just scooped up by somebody. Scan your source code. Make sure that you reference that bad modules list that I talked about earlier. For the DBAs, understand where your crown jewels are. Make sure that they're using Steganography or Encryption or something. Use something to audit all your interfaces. Understand where encryption is needed, and use the security queries that I talked about earlier to minimize public access or eliminate it. Minimize all your old authority. Take out the people that have left the company. One of the things that I highly recommend is do a security audit of the ID of the employee that left last week and see what access they had and what service accounts or what things that they were doing. This is especially important for administrators and things of that nature. Again, make sure you have security around not only the DB2 system, but also the files that the DB2 system uses, and also the logs that it produces through monitoring. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today. Check out my blog and where I've got information on how to set up a security operations center, a SOC, and also performance things. Thank you very much. Back to you, Martin.
Thanks, Dave. What a great presentation. I learned quite a few things in there. That's awesome. But let me take control back from you here, and I'll just to...
Yep. And if anybody has any questions or anything, they can email me, and I'll be happy to engage.
There we are. Get that out of the way and move on. And the last question, of course, we ask in our fantastic studio audience is, did you learn anything today? And the answer is coming in just as I expected. And everybody's voting, and we'll close that up and show that to everyone. 100% of people learned something, Dave.
Hey, hey.
That's what we like to see. Relevant presentations, and there's a lot of good information there. So thanks so much again.
You're welcome. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Always great to have you on, Dave. And we're getting to a point here. I just need to let these people get on with their wonderful weekend. Hopefully you're having a good weekend weather-wise and that sort of thing. We're kind of getting into the fall season here, I think.
Oh, and I forgot to get you the PDF. I'll get that to you right away.
No problem. We'll be getting it up this afternoon with any luck. So here comes the music. Cue the weekend. Wish everyone a fantastic weekend. Thanks for attending. Thanks for presenting, Dave. And the best to all of you.
Thanks, everybody.
And we'll see you in a few weeks on the DB2 Night Show again. Please look for our schedule. Bye-bye.